I started deliberately flubbing auditions at 11, after watching my friend Emma faint on set from exhaustion, while her mom bought a Mercedes with the signing bonus. When I taught other kids their labor rights, my mother threatened to send me to a troubled teen facility. In Utah, I ran away to a safe house, run by former child stars who help kids escape the industry. She offered a $25,000 reward she didn't have and tried to get conservatorship, claiming I was mentally ill for not wanting to work 19-hour days. In my family, child stardom was the ultimate dream. Getting an agent meant you'd made it. Booking commercials proved you were special. I wanted this more than anything, until I turned 11, because that's when I watched what happened to Emma after she booked a Disney show. 3 months in, she was sneaking energy drinks between takes just to stay awake. Her mom bought a Mercedes with the signing bonus while Emma threw up from exhaustion in her trailer. 6 months in, she fainted on set. The producers called it dehydration, but everyone knew. That was the first night I started deliberately flubbing auditions, not because I couldn't nail them, and not because I'd stopped wanting fame, but because I noticed the kids with smaller roles got to go home at reasonable hours, and I realized surviving mattered more than starring. The other kids whispered that I'd lost my edge, but I didn't care. Kids I'd competed with were popping Adderall to memorize 40-page scripts overnight, sobbing in bathroom stalls between takes. My mom didn't care about my slump, though. Every morning, she'd drill me on sides until my voice went hoarse, made me practice crying on cue by screaming at me about how I was destroying our future. You think those other girls are prettier, more talented, work harder? She'd sign me up for workshops where former child stars taught us to hide exhaustion with makeup, to smile through panic attacks. I'd sit there taking notes like I still believed, while secretly documenting every horror story they let slip. By 13, I found what I needed in the most random place. This PA was complaining to another crew member about union violations, waving around some handbook. When she went to grab coffees, I photographed every page with my phone. Child labor laws, mandatory tutors, required trust funds, everything my mother swore didn't apply to special kids like us. I started a group chat with other kids from auditions, not to share tips or celebrate bookings, but to share what I'd learned. We'd swap stories about contracts our parents signed without reading, about promises of exposure that meant working for free. We practiced phrases. I haven't had my required break. Where's the set teacher? I need to call SAG. Then Mia booked it. A Netflix series, 8 episodes, lead role. Her parents were ecstatic, already planning their move to a bigger house. But I knew the production company, knew they'd worked their last lead into a behavioral unit. The night before her first table read, I met her in a Starbucks parking lot, handed her everything I'd collected. Union contacts, labor board numbers, recordings of other kids describing violations. Just in case, I said. She looked at the papers like they were poison. My parents will kill me. Better than letting the industry do it slowly, I said. 3 days into shooting, investigators showed up on set. Mia had called from her trailer after working 19 hours straight. They found forged permits, missing tutors, contracts that violated every protection law in California. When they interviewed the other kids, the whole thing unraveled. The studio called my mother that night. Someone had been spreading negativity among their talent pool. Someone had taught these kids to ask dangerous questions. By morning, they'd traced the group chat back to me. My mother dragged me to the agency, where parents I'd known for years looked at me like I'd personally robbed them. "She's cost us millions!" one father screamed. My mother grabbed my phone, deleted every contact I'd saved. "You're going to that call back tomorrow," she hissed, "and you're going to book it, and you're going to work whatever hours they want, or I'll ship you to one of those troubled teen facilities where they'll teach you to be grateful." Dawn came like a death sentence. Today's audition was for a show known for breaking kids. 6-day shoots, overnight schedules, producers who'd gotten away with it for decades because the parents never complained. The car ride to the audition felt like being driven to my own execution. My mother's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched so tight I could hear her teeth grinding. She dressed me in the outfit she knew casting directors loved, the innocent pastels that made me look younger, more moldable, the kind of look that screamed, "This kid will do whatever you tell them." I clutched my sides in my lap, the pages already damp with sweat. The role was for a character who'd be in every single episode, with night shoots scheduled throughout. The kind of part that would mean dropping out of regular school, living on set, existing in that twilight world where labor laws became suggestions rather than rules. The waiting room was packed with kids I recognized from the circuit. Some avoided my eyes. Word traveled fast in our world. Others shot me looks of pure venom. Their parents huddled in corners, whispering about the troublemaker who'd cost them opportunities. I sat alone while my mother paced, her heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown. They called my name after 2 hours. My mother grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. Her breath was hot against my ear as she leaned in close. "You book this, or you're on a plane tonight." I already looked up programs in Utah. They specialize in fixing ungrateful children. The casting room smelled like stale coffee and desperation. 3 people sat behind a table. The casting director I'd seen at dozens of auditions, a producer known for his demanding vision, and someone taking notes who never looked up. They smiled at me with the practiced warmth of people who saw children as products. I delivered my lines perfectly, hit every emotional hit, cried on cue, even managed the complicated blocking they threw at me last minute. My mother would have been proud if she could see me, but with every word, I felt like I was signing my own death warrant. This role would consume me, just like it had consumed the last girl who played it. She was in therapy now, her parents' Instagram carefully curated to hide the damage. After I finished, the producer leaned forward. His smile reminded me of a shark circling. "That was beautiful, really beautiful. Tell me, are you comfortable with extensive night shoots? This character has a lot of important scenes that take place after dark." I opened my mouth to give the answer my mother had drilled into me. The "yes, absolutely, whatever the production needs" that would seal my fate. But something else came out instead. What about the mandatory 8-hour turnaround between shoots? The temperature in the room dropped. The casting director's smile froze. The producer's eyes narrowed. Even the note-taker looked up. "Excuse me? California labor law requires 8 hours between the end of one shoot day and the start of another for minors. Will the production schedule accommodate that?" The silence stretched like taffy. I could feel my future reshaping itself in that moment, opportunities dissolving like sugar in rain. The producer's face had gone from friendly to calculating. "We'll be in touch," the casting director said, her voice flat. I walked out of that room knowing I'd just signed my own death warrant of a different kind. My mother was waiting in the hallway, hope bright in her eyes until she saw my face. She knew. Somehow, she always knew. The ride home was silent until we pulled into our driveway. Then she exploded, screaming about sacrifice, about everything she'd given up for my career, about the mortgage that depended on my bookings, the credit cards maxed out on headshots and coaching. She grabbed my phone again, checking to make sure I hadn't somehow restored my contacts. Pack a bag, she said finally, her voice deadly quiet. Light stuff. The facility said you won't need much. I went to my room and pulled out my old dance bag, stuffed in some clothes, my toothbrush. At the bottom of my drawer, hidden under old scripts, was a burner phone Mia had given me months ago. Just in case, she'd said. I'd never used it, too scared of what would happen if my mother found it. But now, with nothing left to lose, I powered it on. The group chat was buzzing. News of my casting room rebellion had already spread. Kids sharing stories of their own small acts of resistance, parents' retaliations, close calls with being sent away. But there was something else too. A message from someone I didn't recognize. Heard what you did today. Brave. If you need somewhere safe, there's a network. Kids who aged out, who remember. We help each other. Reply if you need out. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Downstairs, I could hear my mother on the phone, her voice syrupy sweet as she talked to someone about immediate enrollment and breaking down defiance. Another message popped up, this time from a number I recognized. Oliver, a kid who'd disappeared from auditions last year after questioning a contract. It's real. I'm out. Living with my aunt now, going to regular school. They helped me. They can help you too. My mother's footsteps on the stairs made my decision for me. I typed quickly. Need out tonight. Please help. The response was immediate. An address, instructions to leave my regular phone behind, a promise that someone would be waiting. I deleted the messages, powered off the burner, and shoved it deep in my bag just as my mother opened my door. Ready? She asked, but it wasn't really a question. I nodded, shouldering my bag. Followed her downstairs, out to the car. She'd already entered the facility's address in the GPS. 3 hours away, in the desert, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry. We drove in silence through the city, past the studios where I'd spent half my childhood, past the landmarks of my stolen youth. My mother kept checking her mirrors, paranoid that someone might follow, might interfere with her plan to fix her broken investment. So Emma's mom gets a Mercedes, while her daughter gets a side of exhaustion puking. Nothing says supportive parent quite like upgrading your ride while your kid downgrades their health, right? At a red light near the freeway entrance, I made my move, grabbed my bag, threw open the door, and ran. My mother's scream followed me, but I didn't look back. Ducked into an alley, then another, using every bit of location knowledge I'd gained from years of filming in these streets. The burner phone buzzed with directions. Turn left, cross the street. Blue Honda parked outside the convenience store. As I ran, I thought about all the kids still trapped in waiting rooms, still believing their parents' promises that the next role would be different. I thought about Emma, about Mia, about Oliver who'd made it out. The blue Honda was exactly where they said it would be. A woman sat behind the wheel, mid-20s, tired eyes, familiar face. It took me a moment to place her. She'd been huge 5 years ago, a teen star everyone envied. Then she'd vanished. Get in, she said. We have a safe house. Others like you, kids who refuse to be products anymore. As we drove away, I saw my mother's car in the rearview mirror, still stopped at that light, hazards blinking. She'd call the police, claim I'd been kidnapped, but I had evidence, recordings of her threats, documentation of the attempted facility placement. The network had lawyers, Oliver had said, people who remembered what it was like. What happens now? I asked. Now you disappear for a while. Let things calm down. We'll help you file for emancipation if that's what you want. Get you back in regular school, help you remember who you were before they tried to package and sell you. I thought about the audition I'd just blown, about the producer's shark smile, about all the roles I'd never play. And for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Relief. The safe house turned out to be a normal-looking duplex in the valley. Inside, 3 other kids sat around a kitchen table doing homework. Actual homework, not sides or scripts. They looked up when we entered, and I saw my own story reflected in their eyes. You're the one who started the group chat, a girl said. You helped my friend get out of that Netflix thing. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind the reality of what I'd just done. I was 13 years old, and I'd just run away from home. My mother would never forgive me. My career was over. Hey, the older girl who'd driven me said gently. It's okay to grieve it, even the bad parts. It was still your life. That night, lying on a borrowed bed in a room I shared with 2 other runaways from the industry, I finally let myself cry. Not the practiced tears I'd perfected for auditions, but real, ugly, healing sobs. For the childhood I'd lost, for the mother who'd chosen money over me, for all the kids still trapped in the machine, but also for the first time in years, I cried with hope. Tomorrow, I wouldn't have to wake up at dawn for a callback, wouldn't have to practice emotions I didn't feel, wouldn't have to pretend that exhaustion was dedication, that exploitation was opportunity. Tomorrow, I could just be a kid. The network, I learned over the following days, was bigger than I'd imagined. Former child stars who'd aged out and remembered the damage, lawyers who specialized in entertainment law and actually cared about protecting kids, therapists who understood the unique trauma of growing up as a product. They operated quietly, carefully, saving kids one at a time from an industry that chewed them up and spit them out. But my mother wasn't giving up easily. The woman who ran the safe house showed me the missing person report, the Facebook posts painting me as troubled, manipulated by negative influences. She'd hired a private investigator, was calling every contact in the industry to track me down. She can't force you back, the woman assured me. Not once we file the paperwork, but it's going to get uglier before it gets better. I thought about the other kids in my group chat, still stuck in the cycle. Thought about the evidence I'd gathered, the violations I'd documented. An idea began to form. What if we didn't just save kids one at a time, I asked. What if we made it so public that parents couldn't ignore the laws anymore? The room went quiet. The other kids looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear. They knew what I was suggesting. Not just individual rebellion, but organized resistance. It's dangerous, someone said. They have money, lawyers, connections. But we have the truth, I countered, and we have each other. That night, I powered on the burner phone again. The group chat had grown, kids sharing more stories, more evidence. Parents were getting nervous, trying to shut it down, but we kept finding ways to reconnect. The network that had saved me began reaching out to others, offering safe houses, legal help, a way out. But I knew running wasn't enough. Not when Emma was still fainting on sets, not when new kids were signed up every day by parents blinded by dreams of fame and fortune. The system needed to change, so we began to plan. The planning sessions happened after midnight, when the house parents thought we were sleeping. We gathered in the basement, phones on airplane mode, voices barely above whispers. The girl who'd driven me here, Victoria, had connections throughout the industry. She knew which productions were the worst offenders, which casting directors turned blind eyes to violations, which parents had lost custody after their kids finally broke. Our first move came through Daniel, a boy who'd aged out of commercials but still had friends on active sets. He passed word through trusted kids about documenting everything, not just the obvious violations, but the subtle ones too. The missing meal breaks disguised as working skipping lunches, the tutors who signed off on 3 hours of education when kids barely got 30 minutes, the way productions would schedule rehearsals that weren't technically work hours but required full performance. Within days, evidence started flooding in. Photos of call sheets showing 14-hour days for 8-year-olds, recordings of parents coaching their kids to lie about feeling sick, contracts with clauses buried on page 40 that signed away basic protections. I organized everything into folders, cross-referenced with labor codes, built a database that would make any investigator's job simple. My mother's hunt for me intensified. Victoria showed me the posts threading through parent Facebook groups, rewards offered for information, accusations that I'd been brainwashed by jealous former stars, photos of me at younger ages, smiling at premieres, with captions about how happy I'd been before outsiders corrupted me. She'd even started a blog about parents' rights, painting herself as a victim of cancel culture trying to destroy the entertainment industry. The other kids at the safe house had their own battles. Some were fighting emancipation cases. Others were trying to recover earnings their parents had spent. We supported each other through family court appearances, helped prepare testimony, shared lawyers who actually listened. But we all knew individual victories weren't enough. Then Bert arrived, 15 years old, fresh off a streaming series that had worked him into exhaustion-induced seizures. His parents had signed him up for another season while he was still in the hospital. The network had brought him to us in the middle of the night, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold a glass of water. Bert's story lit a fire under our planning. He had footage from his phone of other kids on his set, some as young as 6, working until they fell asleep standing up. Directors yelling at children for forgetting lines after 16-hour days. Parents dosing their kids with energy drinks mixed with prescription stimulants. All of it happening on a production that marketed itself as family-friendly content. We decided to start with his show. It was currently filming, which meant active violations we could document in real time. Victoria reached out to her contacts still working as PAs and crew members. Many remembered their own discomfort watching children pushed beyond limits, but they'd been afraid to speak up. Now they were willing to help. The production was filming overnight shoots all week. Through our network, we learned they'd scheduled a 6-year-old for a 2 a.m. call time, planning to keep her on set until noon. No tutor scheduled, no meal breaks in the timeline. Just 10 hours of a kindergartner performing emotional scenes while her mother counted the paycheck. I messaged kids I knew were on that production, sent them the exact labor codes being violated, gave them the words to use. Some were too scared. Others had parents who monitored their phones, but a few were ready to push back. The night of the overnight shoot, 3 kids independently requested their mandated breaks, asked where the set teacher was, pointed out the turnaround violations. The assistant director tried to brush them off, but they held firm. One girl, barely 10, stood her ground when the director himself came over. She recited the law word for word while he turned purple with rage. By 4 a.m., the production was in chaos. They couldn't legally continue without addressing the violations. Parents were screaming at their kids for being difficult. The producer was on the phone with legal, trying to figure out damage control. And through it all, our inside contacts were documenting everything. But we'd underestimated how quickly they'd trace it back to us. By morning, parents were comparing notes. The kids who'd spoken up had all used similar language, cited the same codes. Someone remembered seeing those exact phrases in my old group chat before my mother had forced its deletion. The blowback was swift. Parents started pulling their kids from any production where they suspected our influence. They formed their own groups, sharing strategies to keep their children focused and grateful. Some hired social media managers to scrub any evidence of their kids' exhaustion from public view. Victoria just casually drops that she was huge 5 years ago, like we're supposed to pretend we don't remember her mall tour meltdown that made TMZ implode. Honestly, picking her up in a blue Honda is the most normal Tuesday afternoon activity for an ex-teen star. The industry was closing ranks. My mother appeared on a podcast for stage parents, tearfully describing how I'd been stolen from my bright future. She revealed details about the safe house, though she didn't know the exact location. She offered a $25,000 reward for my return, money I knew she didn't have. The debt she was willing to go into to get her investment back made my stomach turn. Victoria moved me to a different safe house after that. This one was further from the industry center, run by a couple who'd lost their own daughter to an OD after years of child acting. They had 2 other kids staying there, both fighting emancipation cases. We continued our work, but more carefully now. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A showrunner who'd built his career on kids' content reached out through Victoria. He'd been watching the chaos on his competitors' sets, seeing how productions were grinding to a halt when kids knew their rights. But more than that, he'd been carrying guilt for years about what he'd witnessed and allowed. He offered us something invaluable: insider knowledge of how productions circumvented regulations, the shell companies they created to avoid union oversight, the way they'd film in states with weaker protections, then edit everything in California, how they'd classify clear work hours as voluntary rehearsals or chemistry reads. He gave us the roadmap to every loophole. We refined our approach. Instead of just teaching kids to cite violations, we created comprehensive guides for different scenarios. What to do when they tried to extend your hours, how to document unpaid rehearsals, the difference between actual education time and fake tutoring. We made it simple, accessible, harder to trace back to any one source. The network expanded our distribution. Former child stars with social media followings started sharing information, carefully worded to avoid lawsuits. Crew members leaked call sheets showing violations. Parents who'd lost custody became vocal about why, sharing court documents that exposed the industry's practices. My mother's campaign escalated too. She hired a private investigator who started showing up at auditions, questioning kids about whether they'd heard from me. She created a website with childhood photos of me, painting a picture of a happy child star corrupted by bitter has-beens. She even tried to get conservatorship, claiming I was mentally incompetent to make my own decisions. The legal filing was what finally pushed me to take bigger action. Reading her claims that I suffered from delusions, that my resistance to acting was a form of mental illness, that she needed control of my future earnings to protect me from myself, I realized she would never stop, not until she'd destroyed me or gotten what she wanted. I started recording videos, not showing my face or revealing my location, but sharing my story, talking about the workshops where we learned to hide bruises from too tight costumes, the diet pills handed out like candy to keep us thin, the way parents would punish us for not booking roles by withholding affection, food, basic care. Each video was backed with evidence, documents, recordings made over years of careful observation. Victoria helped me edit them, making sure nothing could be traced to our current location. We released them slowly, one every few days, through anonymous accounts. Former child stars shared them. Industry watchdog groups picked them up. Parents tried to get them taken taken down, but we'd been careful about what we showed, what we claimed. The response was immediate and divided. Some parents doubled down, claiming it was all lies and jealousy, but others started questioning. Kids who'd been too scared to speak up began finding their voices. Productions that had operated with impunity for decades suddenly faced scrutiny from their own crews. Then came the betrayal I should have seen coming. Among the kids we'd been helping was a girl named Tori, just 12, who'd been fighting her parents' attempts to sign her to a reality show. She'd been staying at one of the network's safe houses, preparing for her emancipation hearing. We'd trusted her completely. The night before her court date, she disappeared, left a note saying she'd changed her mind, that she missed her parents. We were disappointed, but understood. The pull of family, even toxic family, was strong. We wished her well and focused on helping others. But Tori hadn't just gone home. She'd gone home with information, names, locations, strategies. Her parents had promised her anything she wanted if she'd help them expose our network. Within days, safe houses were being watched. Kids who'd been planning to leave found their phones confiscated, their movements monitored. Parents filed restraining orders against anyone they suspected of helping their children. The network scrambled to relocate everyone. New safe houses, new protocols, new security measures, but the damage was done. Parents now knew we existed, knew we were organized. They started their own counter-network, sharing information about which kids were at risk of being influenced. They hired security to accompany their children to auditions. Some pulled their kids from school, claiming homeschooling while really just isolating them further. My mother used Tori's information to narrow down where I might be. The investigator started canvassing neighborhoods, showing my photo to locals. Victoria moved me again, this time to a house run by a former child star who'd successfully sued her parents years ago. She lived quietly, using her settlement to help kids like us. But I was tired of running, tired of hiding while kids suffered. The videos were making an impact, but not fast enough. Productions were adapting, finding new ways to exploit loopholes. Parents were getting smarter about hiding violations. We needed something bigger. That's when Oliver reached out with an idea. He'd been documenting his own journey back to normal life, showing what kids could become when freed from the industry's grip. What if we created our own content? Not exposés or takedowns, but positive examples. Kids thriving in regular schools, pursuing interests that had nothing to do with performing, being children instead of products. We started small, short videos of kids at the safe houses doing homework, playing sports, making friends who didn't see them as competition. We showed the therapy sessions where they learned to process their trauma. The first time they slept past 6 a.m. without panicking about missing a call time. The joy of choosing their own clothes without worrying about maintaining an image. The contrast was powerful. While stage parents posted about their kids' latest bookings, we showed kids learning to ride bikes because they'd never had time before. While the industry celebrated child stars' dedication, we showed kids discovering they loved science or art or music they played for fun rather than auditions. My mother's response was predictable. She claimed we were brainwashing children into mediocrity, that we were jealous failures trying to destroy dreams. She organized other parents to create counter-content, showing happy child actors living their dreams. But the strain showed. Kids with dark circles hidden under makeup, smiles that never reached their eyes, parents hovering just off camera, coaching every word. The momentum was shifting, but slowly, too slowly. Kids were still being signed up every day. Parents still believed they were one booking away from wealth and fame. The industry still profited from children's exhaustion. Then Bert made a decision that changed everything. He'd been documenting his recovery, showing the medical reports from his seizures, the therapy for his anxiety, the way his body was slowly healing from years of abuse. He decided to go public. Not anonymous videos or hidden faces, but his full story with his name attached. His parents tried to stop him, sent cease and desist letters, threatened to sue for defamation. But Bert had kept everything. Every contract they'd signed, every text pushing him to work through illness, every email prioritizing bookings over his health. His lawyer, one of the network's allies, made it clear any lawsuit would only expose more damaging evidence. The night before Bert went public, I sat in my latest temporary room, thinking about what would come next. My mother would escalate. The industry would fight back. More kids would suffer while we battled for incremental change. But I thought about Emma, still working despite everything. About Mia, fighting her own parents now. About all the kids who'd found strength in knowing they weren't alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. My mother would find new ways to hunt me. The industry would adapt its exploitation. Parents would find fresh justifications for sacrificing their children's well-being. But we'd shown kids they had power. We'd given them words to defend themselves. We'd created a community that valued their humanity over their earning potential. The burner phone buzzed with messages from kids ready to share their stories. Parents who'd realized too late what they'd done to their children. Crew members willing to testify about what they'd witnessed. The network was growing stronger despite every attempt to destroy it. Outside, Los Angeles glittered with false promises. Somewhere in those lights, children were memorizing lines instead of sleeping. Parents were calculating potential earnings instead of considering their kids' happiness. The machine was still running, still consuming young lives for profit. But we'd thrown wrenches in the gears. We'd taught kids to question, to resist, to value themselves beyond their marketability. And tomorrow, when Bert's story went live, we'd show the world what the industry really cost. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not scripts or sides, but plans. The private investigator showing photos at auditions like he's searching for a lost puppy instead of a kid who just wants normal bedtime hours is peak Hollywood detective work right there. Ways to reach more kids. Strategies to counter the parents' growing organization. Legal resources for those ready to fight. The work was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time since I'd started flubbing auditions at 11, I felt like we were winning. Not in the way my mother defined winning, with bookings and residuals and fame, but in the way that mattered. Kids were choosing themselves over their parents' dreams. They were learning they had worth beyond their ability to perform on cue. The safe house was quiet, but I knew across the city, in other hidden homes, kids like me were planning, hoping, healing. Tomorrow would bring new battles. My mother would devise new strategies to reclaim her investment. The industry would find fresh ways to exploit legal loopholes. But we'd be ready, because we'd learned the most important lesson of all. We were more than products. We were people. And no amount of money, no promise of fame, no parental pressure could change that fundamental truth. The movement we'd started couldn't be stopped now. Too many kids had tasted freedom. Too many had learned their rights. Too many had discovered life beyond auditions and call times. The industry that had consumed so many childhoods would have to change, because we were changing the children it tried to consume. Bert's story went live at dawn. I watched from my laptop as as the view count climbed, refreshing every few minutes. Victoria sat beside me, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. Within an hour, his video had been shared hundreds of times. Former child stars amplified it. Industry watchdogs picked it up. Parents scrambled to discredit him, but Bert had brought receipts, medical records, contracts, text messages from his parents pushing him to work through seizures. My mother's response came faster than expected. By noon, she'd posted her own video, tears streaming down her face as she held up my old headshots. She painted herself as a devoted mother whose mentally ill daughter had been kidnapped by a cult of failed actors. She announced she'd hired a team of private investigators, offered the reward money she didn't have, begged anyone with information to come forward. The other kids at the safe house grew nervous. Some wanted to leave, afraid the attention would lead investigators to our door. Victoria spent hours on the phone with lawyers, making sure our protections were solid. I helped pack emergency bags for everyone, just in case we needed to scatter quickly. That evening, my burner phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against Victoria's advice, I answered. My mother's voice came through, different than I'd ever heard it. Not angry or demanding, but calculating. She explained she'd found a loophole in the emancipation laws. Since I'd been manipulated by adults with ulterior motives, she could claim I lacked capacity to make my own decisions. She'd already filed the paperwork. A hearing was scheduled for next week. If I didn't show up, she'd win by default. If I did show up, she'd have me detained as a runaway. I hung up without responding, my hands shaking. Victoria immediately called our lawyer, who confirmed my mother had indeed filed. The paperwork was professionally done, citing my sudden personality change and rejection of previously enjoyed activities as evidence of mental incapacity. The network went into overdrive. Kids who'd successfully emancipated shared their strategies. Lawyers volunteered to help pro bono. Former child stars who'd been through similar battles offered advice. But we all knew this was different. My mother had industry backing now. Parents who saw me as a threat to their own children's careers were funding her legal team. 3 days before the hearing, Tori reached out through a mutual friend. She wanted to meet, claimed she had information that could help. Victoria advised against it, but something in Tori's message felt genuine. She mentioned details about my mother's plans that she couldn't have known unless she'd been in those parent group meetings. We met at a public library, Victoria waiting in the car outside. Tori looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling as she handed me a flash drive. She explained her parents had sent her back to infiltrate the network, but what she'd seen in those parent meetings had changed her mind. They weren't just trying to find runaways. They were building a system to prevent any child from learning their rights. The flash drive contained recordings from parent strategy sessions, discussions about hiding contract violations, plans to blacklist crew members who reported abuse, a coordinated effort to lobby for weaker child protection laws, and at the center of it all, my mother, teaching other parents how to maintain control through legal manipulation. But the most damaging recording was from 2 nights ago. My mother, thinking she was among allies, had admitted she didn't actually believe I was mentally ill. She laughed about how easy it was to manipulate the system when you knew the right words to use, how she'd coached other parents through similar proceedings, how the money from my future earnings would solve all her financial problems. Tori apologized for betraying us before, then left quickly. She was going to stay with an aunt out of state, she said. Her parents didn't know yet, but they'd figure it out soon. I watched her go, understanding the courage it had taken to come forward. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Victoria helped me prepare, going over possible questions, making sure I had all my documentation. The other kids at the safe house made signs of support, even though they couldn't come to court. Oliver sent a message saying he'd be there, along with several other kids who'd successfully left the industry. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in clothes that made me look my age, not younger or older. Victoria drove me to the courthouse, where a small crowd had already gathered. My mother stood at the top of the steps, surrounded by other stage parents and their lawyers. She saw me and her face transformed, the loving mother mask sliding into place. Inside the courtroom, I sat with my lawyer while my mother's team painted a picture of a disturbed child led astray by predatory adults. They showed my old headshots, videos of me performing, testimonials from casting directors about my lost potential. They made it sound like acting was my entire identity, and rejecting it meant I'd lost my mind. When it was our turn, my lawyer played Tori's recordings. The judge's expression shifted as she heard my mother laughing about manipulating the system, other parents discussing how to hide abuse, the coordinated effort to silence children who knew their rights. My mother's face went white as her own words destroyed her carefully crafted image. I submitted my evidence, the handbook I'd photographed, documentation of labor violations, records of the threats to send me to a troubled teen facility. Other kids had provided affidavits about what they'd witnessed, what they'd endured. The network's lawyers had compiled a comprehensive case showing this wasn't about mental illness, but about a teenager refusing to be exploited. The judge asked me directly why I'd run away. I explained about the audition, the producer's shark smile, my mother's ultimatum, how I'd learned that survival mattered more than starring, how helping other kids recognize their worth beyond their marketability had given me purpose my mother never understood. My mother's lawyer tried to argue that my activism itself was evidence of delusion. What normal teenager spent their time teaching labor law to other kids? But the judge pointed out that advocating for workers' rights, even young workers, wasn't a sign of mental illness, but of social consciousness. During a recess, my mother cornered me in the hallway. She dropped the loving mother act entirely, hissing about how I'd destroyed everything, how selfish I was to choose my own well-being over family financial stability. Victoria stepped between us, but I didn't need protection anymore. I looked at my mother and saw her clearly. Not a monster, just a woman so blinded by desperation and dreams of vicarious fame that she'd sacrificed her daughter's childhood. When court resumed, more people had arrived. Bert was there, walking slowly but steadily. Other kids from the network filled the gallery, parents who'd realized too late what they'd done to their children, crew members who'd witnessed abuse but hadn't known how to help. The courtroom was packed with people whose lives had been touched by the industry's exploitation. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Not only was my mother's petition denied, but the evidence presented raised serious concerns about ongoing child welfare violations in the entertainment industry. She ordered investigations into several productions mentioned in testimony. She granted my emancipation petition, noting that I'd shown remarkable maturity in protecting both myself and other vulnerable children. My mother left without looking at me. Some of the other stage parents followed her, already planning their appeal strategies, but a few lingered, approaching me hesitantly. One woman asked if her daughter could join our group chat. A father wanted to know more about the labor laws he'd never known existed. The change was small, but it was real. Outside the courthouse, the kids from the network celebrated quietly. No media attention, no viral moments, just a a group of young people who'd learned they were more than their earning potential. Bert hugged me carefully, his recovery still ongoing, but his spirit stronger than ever. Oliver talked about his plans for college, something his parents had never let him consider. Others shared their own small victories: first days at regular school, friendships that weren't competitions, dreams that had nothing to do with fame, private investigators and flash drives full of secret recordings. This turned into a spy movie real fast. Nothing says devoted mother quite like accidentally confessing on tape that you're just after your kids' money while teaching other parents your manipulation tricks. Victoria drove me back to the safe house, but I knew I wouldn't stay long. With emancipation granted, I could make my own choices. The network had connected me with a family who'd fostered other industry refugees. They understood the unique challenges, the need to discover who you were beyond performing. I'd finish high school, maybe go to college. Normal things that had once seemed impossible. That night, I updated our resource guide with information about the emancipation process. Kids reached out with questions, and I answered what I could. The work continued, one child at a time. No grand revolution, no industry-wide transformation, just kids learning they had rights, and adults who remembered their own exploitation helping however they could. My phone buzzed with a message from Mia. She'd watched the hearing coverage, seen how many kids had shown up to support me. She was still fighting her own battles, but she felt less alone now. Emma had reached out too, finally ready to talk about what she'd endured. The network grew stronger not through dramatic victories, but through quiet connections, shared knowledge, mutual support. I thought about my mother, probably at home planning her next move. A part of me grieved for the relationship we'd never have, the trust broken beyond repair. But I also felt free in a way I hadn't since I was 11, watching Emma faint on set and realizing the cost of dreams built on children's exhaustion. The entertainment industry would continue consuming childhoods. Parents would still see dollar signs instead of their kids' well-being. But now there were cracks in the system. Kids who knew their rights. Adults who remembered their own trauma and worked to prevent it. Small, safe spaces where children could just be children. I closed my laptop and looked around the room I'd called home for these chaotic weeks. Tomorrow I'd pack my things, move on to the next chapter. Not as a failed child star or a troublemaker who'd cost parents millions, but as a teenager who'd chosen her own worth over others' profits. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.